Well, welcome back to the Know Your Numbers podcast. This is your host, Chris McCormick, and today's guest is Drew White. Drew is out in the Omaha, Nebraska region. He is a financial professional focusing on the infinite banking concept. And Drew, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't always been in the financial industry. I think I saw you might have had some medical practice in your day. So if you don't mind giving a brief introduction, a little history about Drew White and where you find yourself now.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on, Chris. Really appreciate it. And you are correct. My background was as a pediatric nurse. I did mostly oncology for my career, and learned a lot. And that's actually how I found my way to what I do. I graduated with $150,000 plus in student loan debt. Knew nothing about money. My dad tried to warn me when I was a freshman. I didn't listen,
Yeah.
because when you're 19, you don't think parents know anything. Right. So I didn't listen to him, but he sat me down. He didn't have a financial background. He was a pastor. So he sat me down after college and at least knew a little Dave Ramsey and was like, let's look at this. Yep. And it was like, okay, I'm making like 35, 40,000 a year to start. And half my money's going to pay in this debt. That's interesting. I didn't really consider that. I just was like, hey, I want to golf 4 days a week. So let's do this career. I've always, been kind of goofy. So working with kids and being a nurse, that seems cool, So I didn't really think about the money, but that kickstarted my whole financial journey. Wow. I'm not as big of a Dave guy, but I did follow Dave's like guidelines and Gazelle like intensity to get out of that debt. Yeah. And then through like kind of a winding road, tried a lot of things and found my way to teaching people the infinite banking concept. And I gave up my nursing license, about a year and a half ago ish. So really love what I do. And I just couldn't see myself ever going back. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. And yeah. I don't think you're alone in that. I find just the more I introduce myself to the financial world, I find that a lot of people have medical backgrounds and get either fed up or realize that there's greener pastures out there. Do you think there's any overlap there? Like what's the connection? Is it just a work ethic? Is it an understanding of numbers, or what is it?
Yeah, I have a lot of theories personally. I think if you're going to work in inpatient, in a hospital, yep. I do think there's kind of a high burnout rate. And what I kind of felt like is there's some people who are incredible and they can do it 25, 30 years. I've met those nurses and yep. I don't know how they did it. But for most people, I feel like it's almost like a career, like how it used to be with politicians, how you were supposed to go serve your time as a politician and be done, not have career politicians like we do now. Yeah. And I think kind of that way in the medical profession, sometimes it's like, especially if you're going to be inpatient in the hospital, like maybe it's a career where you go and you do it for a little bit, but then it's not forever. And so, that's what happened for me is like, I started doing it and there's just things you don't think about. Like, you're gonna have a family. Are you going to want to work weekends and holidays forever? I didn't. Mm-hmm. And then, so I think kind of what happens is you start saying, there's gotta be something else where I can do, where I could spend time with my family, but, still something I enjoy. And, a lot of people in that profession want to serve others and they want to, help other people. So that's kind of my theory is like, they kind of start looking for a way out and then they find their way to something where they can still work with people because that you get into that because you like people and you like helping them. Right. And so for me, that's how I kind of what happened for me is like, I really like helping people, but maybe in a little bit different way. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to have this fear in my back of my head about, are my kids going to get sick because I'm always around sick kids, So, that's a long-winded way, but that's kind of my theory that I've come up with over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think the one thing that you touch upon is the act of service. And that's something near and dear to my heart. It's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are now starting to realize is like, it's about the client and the difference you can make. And for so long, I feel like the financial industry has been tainted by people who are just out there trying to make a quick buck and don't really care about the person who they're serving. But somebody like you, Drew, is clearly coming from that service perspective. I wonder how that has started and how it shaped your career in the finance industry and how it reflects in the well-being of your clients.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll be totally honest. Like, I think when I first started, I had more of that mindset that you're talking about like, this is for me to make money for me and my family.
Yep.
And I'm lucky enough, I work with a smaller firm called Create Tailwind. And I don't say that to, you know, to promote them. I say it because meeting those guys has had a huge impact on my life and the people on that team, because they were kind of had to refocus me and reset me and be like, our job is to serve people first, and then the rest flows from there.
Yeah.
And even, you know, a couple of the guys are very, very big on the book, The Go Giver. And so I read that like 3 times, you know, to like, because I needed that lesson to sink in and about giving first. And so it was interesting because it's like, I kind of went away from that service model that I learned as a nurse. You serve first, you know, and I felt like that was something I was really good at, was putting them first. But then I switched this industry, and it took me a little bit to get into that mindset. And so I won't say that I was like, I jumped in and was like, yeah, I'm going to serve everybody. I definitely jumped in selfish, you know? But when I switched, it's kind of like the Go Giver talks about, then, you know, things happen for you. And so now, you know, I just try I had someone reach out on LinkedIn today that, you know, asked me, you know, does the policy that they currently have work for infinite banking? And I was like, sure, send it to me. I'll take a look. You know, I'm not going to charge anything. I'm happy to help. And I said, if you have something that works, awesome, you know, let's use it. So yeah, it's really, you know, it took some time, but I've definitely shifted. And so now, you know, it's like, even with clients, I'm just trying to think like, okay, how can I help them more? How can I help them learn this concept better? And, you know, even just calling them, checking in. And so, so you know, full honesty, I probably wasn't there at the start, but it's the Go Giver helped a lot. And it's a short read for anybody who hasn't read it. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. And that has been recommended before, at least on podcasts I've listened to, but I haven't taken that step of actually reading it. It might be something that's worthwhile. Drew, do you think your faith plays a factor into your heart of service? Because I mean, you say you're a pastor's kid. I assume you're still involved in the church today, knowing your love for the next generation.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say the greatest commandment other than loving your God is loving your neighbor, and Jesus gave the ultimate act of service by giving his life. So curious as to whether that plays a part into the way you approach the marketplace.
Yeah, I think you know, and I think, you know, faith has a role. And I've taken kind of a winding road of my faith journey that it's too long for your listeners today, but you know, I think too, being around my parents, who that's what their life was all about, was serving other people.
Right.
And so I really learned a lot from their example. Still today, I mean, they're always serving in various ways. And my dad just retired, you know, not this year, but last February.
Wow.
And so he retired, but even still, he's always finding ways to, you know, I mean, they're always helping us with our kids and serving that way. So I definitely think, you know, through, you know, their faith and then what they taught me, that's definitely had a big role and impact on my life for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it shows too, just the way that you approach it. So
thank you.
I honor that. Yeah. And let's get into the good stuff, man. I mean, we could talk all day about Drew's story, but I do think some people would love to hear about this infinite banking concept, what it does, how it can benefit someone. And we talk about it. We talk about life insurance, the tax advantages that come from it, but also the idea that it's not just, it doesn't always have to be just insurance. So Drew, if you don't mind just giving a quick, brief understanding about what it is you offer in the marketplace, how it can serve someone. And honestly, I think the biggest struggle we have is communicating it to the younger generation about why it might be worthwhile to make that investment in insurance.
Yeah. So I'll try one way, and if it doesn't hit, you tell me. You know, so but one way I've told people is, you know, some people, myself included, I use, you know, rewards credit cards. And why do I use rewards credit cards versus why not just pay cash, right? So for me, I use rewards credit cards because then I get travel points, and I've flown free and stayed at places free for like 8 years now, like all the time, you know, every year my wife and I take advantage of that. Whereas if I paid cash, I don't get that benefit. Right. So, you know, it's kind of a similar, you know, if you can make that leap with whole life insurance, and it has to be specifically designed whole life insurance from a mutual company. But you put your money there instead of a bank, you know, and instead of paying cash from a bank, because you get all these benefits that we could go into, you know, like tax-free guaranteed growth, you get you can never interrupt the compounding interest going on inside of that. So when you do use that money versus a bank, like if you used money from a savings account, you were getting 0.06% interest on it.
Yep.
And anytime you use it, that interest has now been interrupted.
Right.
Well, in your policy, in your banking system, we would call it, you cannot interrupt that interest going on in there when you use it. So you get growth inside your bank, your policy system, and then outside it. So some people call it the and asset.
Yeah. Right.
So that's kind of a basic level, I would say, that I've tried to explain people that way, that sometimes helps. And some people hate credit cards, so then they're like, what?
Yep. Yeah.
So if you use it wisely, they can work for you.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's the thing is, yeah, using it wisely and getting these policies set up correctly, because there's a lot of people hear insurance or insurance broker and insurance salesman, and they kind of flinch and hesitate and think about all the horror stories that you hear about. But if you're a trusted individual and you're seeking out the right wisdom, I think it serves a great purpose. And one of those, like you mentioned, is tax free growth. Really is like, you don't pay taxes on the growth on it. And if you take those loans out, you don't pay taxes on that either. So
and I think, I think a shift too, that the younger, you mentioned the younger generation. So a lot of times when I do speak with people in the younger generation, they'll say to me like, well, whole life insurance is a bad investment, and I always have to correct them and say, well, it's not an investment. What we're talking about is like actually kind of almost, if you think of it like replacing a savings account, or and personally replacing a retirement account as well. And it's a place to store money, but that you're also going to use to invest, and so that's really like a lot of what we focus on is like, no, use this money for your business. If you're a business owner, use it for real estate, go buy cash flowing assets. And so I get that a lot with young people, or, this one guy, it's like, why would I do that when I could 10x my money elsewhere? And must have been listening to Grant Cardone or something. And I was like, no, man, I'm not saying do this or 10x your money. I'm saying do this and 10x your money and then get the benefits from this too, Right. So I think there's some misconceptions about it. And, traditional whole life insurance not designed this way, isn't designed for cash value. So that's some of, and then you got Dave Ramsey and Sue Zorman railing on it. So that's some of the hurdles to overcome.
Yeah. It's tough because those guys they serve a purpose, right? You talk about Dave Ramsey and helping you get out of debt, right? Yeah. He's perfect at that, but
he's great at it. Yeah.
There's people out there that doesn't serve, and to be seeking or to have these guys who are financial professionals bashing an entire industry or an entire corner of the financial industry, it doesn't look good for anyone. So I'm right there with you. And I think the more of us that we can have taken this thing head on, the better it will be. And maybe we will in Dave Ramsey over one of these days, but
he's got a loud voice and a big audience, but and he is great at helping people get out of debt. I can't dog him for that, but he definitely compares apples to oranges when it comes to infinite banking and whole life.
That's good. So how have you gone about like learning and approaching the subject, right? Like not coming from a financial background, you had some wisdom from your father, but there's a lot to learn. And that's one of the issues is there's a lot to learn and it's hard to find all the information. So Drew, I'm curious as to how you've grown into that, because I know you'd be knowledgeable on the subject and one of the top guys I see talking about it. So would love to hear how that journey's taken place.
Yeah. So, and to be totally honest, because I was a Dave Ramsey guy, I had to overcome that hurdle against whole life insurance when I first heard of it. So, I heard about it on a podcast that was like 10 minutes long. It was very short. Reached out to those guys and they did a presentation, kind of explained it to me, sent me a book, which is Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. And I read that and had to read it again because I didn't totally, always get it. But so I'm constantly reading, and honestly, like I'm reading the book again right now, just kind of always trying to re-educate. So it sits out in our family room and, I'll read a chapter a night or something. And even our group at Create Tailwind, like we just went through the book together as a group, like the past 2 months. So, so that's a big one. And then like our group, we actually have courses for people to go through and learn. So I take the courses, you know,
Yeah.
but it is like an education learning curve. And even when we like in the book, there's this thing called equipment financing, and I won't go into it here, but when we went over as a group at Create Tailwind, I mean, I learned something new again and I was like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time, you know? And so I think for me, it's, you know, constantly taking in that information, reading, asking questions. You know, I call up people, and I'm like, just yesterday, I connected with another guy who teaches this. And so I was picking his brain, like, how do you use your system? And I love that. I love meeting people that use their systems differently, because that's the cool part of this, is there's so many different ways to do it, you know? So for me, it's a lot of reading, a lot of asking questions. And you're right. Like, the education part of this is a big part of it, you know? And if someone, a lot of times people will watch a video and then they don't want to do any more work, and they're just, and if they have a certain way that they already learned from the financial world, it's tough for them to overcome that hurdle. But if they keep kind of digging and, you know, and kind of uncovering more, they find out like, maybe what I was taught about money wasn't totally right, you know? So
that's so funny you say that. And I don't mean to harp on anybody in particular, but I was sitting down on an appointment, and it was somebody in the financial industry, and like the way that you connect with those people is much different than somebody who's coming on from a place of learning and wants to learn about the concept. Like, if it's somebody that's, for me, like I have a history in the corporate environment, accounting environment, and I just notice a much different approach to the subject. It feels like sometimes when you're working with those types of people, they have to feel like they have it all figured out. And I speaking from experience myself too, is like you kind of get this imposter syndrome if somebody's coming to you with a topic that you don't know much about. But when you're coming from that sense of humility, you want to learn everything there is to learn about it. That's where you have the most growth, and then you see the benefit of it. And I think that's, again, part of the problem too, is like some people just don't want to learn about it and are turned off by the fact that there might be something out there they don't know about.
I think for me, just to tag on what you're saying, like my background as a nurse, it's like one of the first things they teach you is, if you're talking to a patient and you don't know the answer, you don't make up the answer, right? Or you don't pretend you know it, because that's dangerous. So you say, you know what, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get you the answer, like, right, you know, as quickly as I can, or whatever, you know. And so you never go in and pretend. And the nurses that would pretend to know an answer were the ones that got in trouble. And so for me, like, I've carried that over to everything. Like, if I don't know something, I mean, I've got some pride and ego in other things, but I have no pride and ego there. I mean, I just will say, like, you know what, you stumped me. I don't know. I'm going to get the answer. I'll ask someone smarter than me and get back to you. Because it's like, I don't expect anybody to have all the answers, you know? So that I took that one from my nursing career, and like learned that like day one. It's like, so awesome. Don't pretend that you know something you don't know.
Right. And to the listener out there, I know this to be true, because before we hit record, Drew was giving an example of how that happened just yesterday, I think it was. And that's the thing. Every financial professional, there's and just professionals in general, there's areas of our life that we don't know about. It's like, I think of Shaquille O'Neal, right? He could dunk the ball, but he wasn't the best 3-point shooter or free throw shooter. Like there's areas of strengths and weaknesses, and at being okay with those and looking to grow on those too, right? Not just accepting them, but understanding that there's areas for growth always leads to the best service and best value for everyone. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, Drew, I did see too that you have some experience in the real estate world. Are you investing in real estate now? Is that something that you're pursuing, or am I wrong there?
No, you got it. Yeah. So that kind of, this ties into my debt history. Like once we got back to zero with getting out of debt, I didn't understand how to build wealth. I'd only been in scarcity because of the Dave way of, just Giselle paying it off intensely. That's his way. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how do you build wealth? How do you build sustainable wealth? And I read, of course, you go on the internet and you read everything. Everybody says real estate, real estate. And so I was like, oh, okay. But I was still scared of debt, didn't understand leveraging other people's money, anything like that. And so I was like, I came across this guy that was flipping mobile homes and teaching people about it. And he was providing notes for mobile homes. He'd go in and find a cheap one and provide a note with a down payment.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that seems like low cost of entry. And then I could kind of learn and then grow from there. And so I actually ended up doing it much longer than I anticipated. I did it 2 years. I just wanted to get my feet wet, I did it 2 years. I still have a few notes out there that I'm holding. But so then since then, my wife and I, we've been working on trying to find locally here an apartment complex to buy.
Okay.
So I have not gotten anything in that space yet. We've been working for quite a few months now, waiting for we're waiting for the right opportunity.
Right.
And so we have to be a little patient, but so that's, and then I have done like some hard money loans for some other like real estate investors, like a few small ones with land and things like that. So, but yeah, so that's kind of our journey. We're still learning the multifamily space. I have quite a few friends who are passive investors. I haven't done anything totally with them yet, but I'd like a little higher cash on cash, but so that's kind of, so that's where I'm at with that.
That's awesome. That's what I mean by know your numbers, higher cash on cash. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, would you is that when you're looking at deals, are you planning to use your whole life policy to fund them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so those hard money loans I talked about, that's what I did with that, is I used my policy and then, paid it back with that. Still am paying back some of those. And then, for real estate. So my plan right now, even though interest rates have risen, they're still cheap historically. I know people are very upset about them right now, but they're still, they're still less than inflation. And so what I would actually do is, yes, I'm going to use our policies. My wife and I both have some, and then we'll use that as the down payment on the property, but we'll still do a bank money, bank loan, and then use other people's money to, pay that back into our system and rinse and repeat, keep doing it again, and hopefully refinance the deal. That's the other plan. So, but so that would be the plan, is to use the money from our system.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to elaborate one more time, the reason why is when we use that, it's still going to grow inside that system at that tax-free guaranteed rate, uninterrupted. So, so we're getting the growth there, and then we're going to get the growth in the real estate. So definitely.
Awesome. And to add on top of that, the money that you use is coming into your pocket tax-free, right? It's technically a loan. So yeah.
And since you're a CPA, you can attest to this better than I can, but the one I work with says when I loan my LLC money and charge an interest rate, I can deduct that interest payment back to myself. So that's another benefit that, our LLC gets from that as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's awesome. That's what I mean. This tax code, it can be crazy, but it can be a great benefit for guys out there. Looking to make some money and to serve others too, because it's providing value in the marketplace is what it's all about. So awesome, Drew. Well, man, that was pretty much everything I had to cover. I mean, we talked a little bit about it. You might even have it trademarked, is what you refer to as the upside down method. Is that something that we'd like to go into a little bit? I mean, I know I have an idea of what it means, but what's all upside down about it?
Yeah. So, and if he's referencing LinkedIn for those that don't know, I one day I was updating my profile picture because I went from having hair to being bald. And I just had this wild hair. I was like, I should do my picture sideways. And then as I was doing, I was like, oh, I should do it upside down. And then it light bulb moment was like, oh my gosh, upside down. Because what I teach is upside down from the traditional financial world. Right. And so I said, I teach an upside down wealth method called the infinite banking concept. And so my profile picture on LinkedIn is upside down on purpose. I get people who message me and be like, do you know your picture's upside down? Do you know how to fix that? Wow. And then I have a friend, Don Spafford, who on LinkedIn, and he's like, you should figure out how to do podcasts where you come in upside down on the video. And I was like, I haven't figured that out yet.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's why. So it's upside down from traditional financial teaching is why I say it.
Oh man, that's awesome. And I love it. And I couldn't agree more, but it works. And that's what Drew is out there to share with you. And man, Drew, I just thank you for taking the time to sit down today. I really do appreciate it. I love what you're doing out there, and I love the story too. Not having the financial background and being able to come and take this bull by its horns. It's inspiring, and I hope a listener out there is opening their eyes to the opportunity that's in front of you. Drew, the last question that we ask all our guests here on the Know Your Numbers podcast. Well, actually, before we get to that, is there any way for people to get in touch with you, ask you more questions on some of the things that were referenced here? And
so they can follow me on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I would also say my website's really easy. That's probably the quickest, easiest way to contact me. There's a button on there. And it's ibcdrew.com, which stands for Infinite Banking Concept. So ibcdrew.com. And if they want to chat with me, they can chat with me, email me as well. So that'd be a great way.
That's awesome. And I think I also saw, is there an assessment for them to fill out to see if
there's an assessment to see if they want to click that, they can see if there'd be a good fit for this or not. And there's a link also on there to our course. So lots of opportunities on there to learn more. Awesome.
Well, if you're listening out there, go check out ibcdrew.com, get all the things that you need to know, everything that you heard here and so much more, I'm sure. Drew White, my man, thank you very much. The final question that we have for you is, what is one truth about money that most people regard as myth?
Ooh, one truth is money that most people regard as myth. I should have prepared for this.
No notes.
I would say probably the answer I would give is that we all have a relationship with money and a mindset around money, and it needs to be explored. For me, I mentioned that I came from getting out of debt and I had a scarcity mindset and I didn't know it. And so I met a mentor who actually gave me this exercise that I think anybody should do, and I still do today. And you write down the phrase "money is," and then you just free write for 5 minutes. You don't think, you just write. And it reveals a lot about how you like kind of subconsciously and consciously view money. And so I think that might be one. People might think it's a myth that like, oh, you have a mindset around it. Okay, sure. I need to work on my money mindset. But I can tell you that really did more for me than anything, realizing that I had a relationship with money, and I wasn't aware of it. So that's what I'd give you.
That's awesome. And that's a unique answer here on the Know Your Numbers podcast. So honor to you. That's awesome. But thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure, man. And I'm excited to see what's next in the world of infinite banking. So
thanks, Chris.
My pleasure.